From an entirely different brick system that looks like fake Lego to a cape piece with one hole too many. These are 196 things you didn't know about Lego. Starting with a coffee cup hiding inside the Jurassic Park Jeep Wrangler set. Now, if you haven't seen this set yet, it's a Lego version of the actual Jeep from the movie, and the interior is packed with details. But the one that really got people talking was a tiny coffee cup sitting inside the car, because it's not just random decoration. In the original Jurassic Park, the most famous shot in the entire movie is the water cup rippling right before the T-Rex shows up for the first time. So Lego put a coffee cup inside the Jeep specifically to reference that. But the set itself isn't the only place Lego hid something. In the reveal video for the Jeep, if you look at the opening shots very carefully, you'll see a sign for a Lego store with a grainy picture of what looks like a Triceratops skeleton set. And this was actually done on purpose. Lego was teasing the release of set 77985, which is set to be released on June 1st. But when they dropped this video, it wasn't even announced yet. Now, the Jeep itself being full of references makes sense because it has an interior. However, Shrek is not supposed to open, but he does. And when you open his stomach in the Shrek, Donkey, and Puss in Boots set, there's an onion in there, along with a waffle and an eyeball. The eyeball is a reference to the opening scene of Shrek where he's just sitting at home eating eyeballs out of a bowl. The onion is obviously there because Shrek loves eating onions, but it might also be referencing the scene where Shrek tells Donkey that ogres are like onions.
Ogres are like onions.
The waffle is there because Donkey absolutely loves waffles and always wants Shrek to eat them.
Swapping manly stories, and in the morning, I'm making waffles.
The waffle and onion are pretty obvious if you know the movies, but most people don't even remember the eyeball scene, which makes the detail even more impressive. But you don't have to open anything to find the next secret in this set. On the base of the swamp build, there's a small frog sitting in the corner that most people probably just ignore. But that frog is almost certainly King Harold from Shrek 2, the fairy godmother's son, who was originally a frog prince and got turned into a human king. He eventually turns back into a frog at the end of Shrek 2, so I'm pretty sure Lego put this piece there just to reference him. But this next reference is a lot deeper and definitely true. There's a blue and red flower you can put in Donkey's mouth, and in the original Shrek, there's a scene where Donkey picks a flower, and when he talks about it, it seems like he can't see colors.
Blue flower, red thorns. This would be so much easier if I wasn't colorblind.
We find out that Donkey is actually colorblind, so Lego put this flower in the set to reference that. And the Toy Story Slinky Dog bookend set is doing something similar, except instead of 3 references, there are like 10, so get ready. The books in the set are absolutely packed with 1x1 stud builds of different characters. There's Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head, a pizza tile that's a nod to the Pizza Planet, 3 green aliens, a troll from the Knick Knack short, which is a Pixar short from 1989 that most people have never even heard of, Bo Peep, a bunch of army men, Ham, Buzz Lightyear, and Rex. That's basically the entire Toy Story cast compressed into the smallest builds Lego can make, all tucked away inside 2 books you're not even supposed to open. But somehow, that's not even the craziest Toy Story secret in 2026, because the Lotso set goes even further and hides a completely different kind of reference at the same time. If you pull off Lotso's back, you find mini 1x1 versions of Jessie, Bullseye, Woody, and Buzz, just like in the bookend set. But there's also a tile with a strawberry printed on it, and that's a direct reference to the fact that Lotso smells like strawberries. There's also a much smaller secret in the Pizza Planet set from the same wave. The coin dispenser tile has what looks like a graffiti tag from Sid. It's barely visible, and there's no explanation anywhere for why it's here. It's just a piece of lore for a character that hasn't been around in forever. But this wouldn't be a Pixar set without that one reference that we all know, A113. This time, it's hidden on the dashboard of the rocket, and if you look next to it, you'll find another 1x1 character, and this time, it's an alien. Now, all of these secrets are hidden inside or on the back of sets, but the Pikachu set hides something in plain sight that you never even notice. It's actually hiding on the base plate, not Pikachu himself. If you look at it really closely, you'll notice that there are some studs that make the number 25. But what does this have to do with Pikachu? Well, Pikachu is Pokemon number 25 in the Pokédex, and instead of making an obvious reference, the designers hid it in plain sight instead. And the Messi set does something similar with its base. Messi's had a pretty long career in soccer, so to honor that, the designers hid the flag of every club he's ever played for in the base of the set. There's Barcelona, PSG, Inter Miami, Argentina, and one other one that I actually don't know, so let me know what it is in the comments. The problem is that once you actually finish building the set, the base gets covered up and you can't see the flags anymore. They're only visible during the building process itself. But this is just bag 1. There are way more secrets in this set. Bag 2 has the pieces for the second part of the base, and when you build it, you get this really sick M made with the colors of the Argentinian flag. Obviously, we know what this stands for, but since it's the base, it gets covered up too. Bag 3 has the first set of pieces that go on top of the base, and just like with Bag 1, these pieces build references to every team Messi's played for. Only this time, they're micro builds of buildings instead of flags, which is honestly way cooler. Then there are 3 stars, which obviously represent the 3 World Cups he's won. But then we get to this piece, and you might start scratching your head. This is actually a really famous obelisk in Argentina, so it makes total sense for it to be here. But the best hidden detail in any new LEGO sports set right now is in the soccer ball set. From the outside, it looks completely normal, but if you press a button, the whole thing splits open and there's an entire micro stadium on the inside. There's the team that won the World Cup, a crowd, screens with a replay of the final goal, and there are even fireworks, which is crazy. Obviously, this is hidden inside the set, but LEGO launched something in March of 2026 that genuinely changed the definition of the LEGO brick, even though most people really don't like it. I'm talking about the Smart Brick. The Smart Play system introduced this brick, and from the outside, it definitely looks a little different. But on the inside, there's a custom microchip, an accelerometer, a sound sensor, color sensors, and a speaker. The chip itself is smaller than a single LEGO stud, and unlike every other piece of tech from LEGO, there's no app to download, no Bluetooth to connect, and no phone required. It just sits in the build, senses what's happening around it, and reacts accordingly. But let's look at the Throne Room Duel set so you can really see what I mean. If you put the brick on the back of Palpatine's throne, not only will it make noises when you turn the chair around, but when you actually put Palpatine on his throne, the brick senses it and plays the Imperial March. This is genuinely so cool, but that's not even all it can do. The main part of this set is obviously the duel, and if you place the bricks in the right spot and move your minifigs around, it does this. It can also play a sound when Luke loses, which doesn't really sound that good. But there's still more to this brick. In Luke's Red 5 X-Wing, the brick makes a bunch of different sounds. For starters, just putting it on the ship and moving it around sounds like this. Then you can put Luke in the cockpit and it'll play this song. But the coolest sound by far happens when you put R2-D2 in the X-Wing. The fact that it can recognize characters is such a sick feature, but this gets taken to a whole other level in the new Mos Eisley Cantina set, in theory. This set had some of the most sounds out of this entire wave, but the best ones were supposed to be with the Cantina set. You can attach the brick to the designated spot, crank a lever, and the Cantina song would play, only it didn't sound good, like at all. It gets worse though. You can put compatible minifigures in front of it, and they'll have different singing voices depending on who it is. Obi-Wan sounds like this, and Greedo sounds like this. It goes without saying, but these genuinely sound terrible, which is honestly a shame. The one thing that makes Smart Bricks a little better is that they aren't locked to new sets. You can take the smart tags from any of the Star Wars Smart Play sets and drop them into a completely different set you already own, including sets that came out years ago. Someone's already tested this by installing the tags into a Pan Am airliner set and making it sound like an X-Wing. So if you've got old sets sitting somewhere on a shelf, this brick can bring them to life without you buying anything new. Unfortunately, Smart Bricks do get a lot of hate, and I can understand why, but let's just move on to the next secret. The Zelda Ocarina of Time battle set has what I think is one of the best simple play features of the year. There's a button built into the structure, and when you press it, the ruins of Hyrule Castle erupt, and Ganondorf launches up out of the debris. It's recreating the exact moment from Ocarina of Time where he explodes out of the rubble for the final confrontation with Link. The launch mechanism is hidden inside the ruins, so from the outside, it just looks like a normal part of the build, which is why I like it so much. And the Nocturne Alley set coming in June of 2026 has interactive features too, but there's one in particular I want to focus on. It has a Floo Network fireplace entrance that you can slide a minifigure through, and apparently when you do this, it activates the Hand of Glory. The Hand of Glory was that weird hand in the Chamber of Secrets that grabbed Harry in that store. But because this set doesn't come out until June 1st, we don't actually know what this feature looks like. Will the hand really get activated by a Floo? Who knows? The description is talking about a bunch of cool stuff, but until it comes out, there's no way for us to know. This next secret is also from Harry Potter, but you'd only know about it if you were super tapped in. One of the next Harry Potter sets coming out is the Dumbledore's Office Book Nook set, and one of the minifigures it comes with is a special Phoenix Patronus. But why is it special? Because this is Dumbledore's personal Patronus, and the only reason it's in this set is to celebrate the 25th anniversary of LEGO Harry Potter, so you can't get it anywhere else. This set is all about the minifigures, but the Anzellan Starship Battle set doesn't have any at all until you look a little closer. Somewhere in the repair section inside the ship, there are pieces of a battle droid that you can find that build a complete one. It's not counted as a minifigure in the official listing, it's not shown on the box, and it's not in the description. It's just there, waiting for someone to pick up the loose parts and build it. But the UCS Mandalorian's N1 Starfighter has a manufacturing process that LEGO hasn't ever used before. The hull is built with drum lacquered silver elements, the same finish used on the gold bricks in the FIFA World Cup trophy set from earlier this year. Drum lacquering gives the silver that chrome-looking shine that regular pieces don't have, and when light hits it at the right angle, it looks completely different from every other gray set LEGO's ever made. You notice it as soon as you look at it. But to end the video, LEGO quietly replaced the Grogu minifigure mold in 2026, and based on the reaction online, nobody asked for this. The body that Grogu had been using since he first showed up in sets back in 2020 is just gone, and replaced with an entirely new mold that popped up in 4 different sets all at the same time. One of the most recognizable and beloved minifigures LEGO's made recently got retired without a single word. And even though people were mad about this, the new version gives him actual defined legs with feet at the bottom instead of the rounded base everyone was used to. So it low-key looks way better. But not every change in LEGO is for everyone. Sometimes LEGO tweaks things for different countries, and the country with the most by far is China. Back in 2019, when LEGO first started releasing Chinese New Year sets, they weren't available anywhere outside of East Asia. If you lived in the US, the UK, Australia, anywhere that wasn't East Asia, you just couldn't buy them. And the community's reaction was pretty bad. People were genuinely upset, and the crazy part is that LEGO actually listened. By May of 2019, they reversed the policy and started selling the sets to the whole world. But that wasn't the only time China got something nobody else did. In January of 2021, LEGO ran a gift with purchase promotion in their Chinese stores. And to get it, you had to spend the equivalent of over $300 in a single order. Not only was this promotion only in China, but the money threshold was higher than basically anything LEGO was doing in other countries at the same time. So it wasn't just exclusive, it was expensive exclusive. But then there's the story of LEGO Life. LEGO Life was a social media app that LEGO made so people could share their LEGO builds all over the world. In every other country, it's LEGO Life. But in China, the app doesn't even exist. LEGO had to partner with Tencent and build a completely different app from scratch to satisfy China's laws. And LEGO's own CEO confirmed this publicly, so it's 100% true. China having its own version of an app is one thing, but in the 1970s, Italy got its own version of the actual brick. LEGO made a completely separate system called Minitalia, which was only sold in Italy. And if you didn't know what you were looking at, you'd probably think it was a knockoff. The bricks used a different, lower quality plastic than standard LEGO, HIPS instead of ABS. They also had an X-shaped underside instead of the normal tube, and didn't have the LEGO logo on them anywhere. That last part is why so many of them got thrown away. Parents and kids assumed they were cheap fakes and didn't keep them. LEGO made them like this so they could sell bricks to Italy for cheaper, but the result was a version of their own product that looked fake. But Italy isn't even the only country where this happened. Japan had almost the exact same thing happening at the same time. From 1970 to 1978, LEGO made a line called Olo exclusively for the Japanese market. These were pretty much identical to Minitalia bricks, but they used the higher quality ABS plastic instead, and they were reportedly sold in rural areas while regular LEGO was sold in major cities like Tokyo. So Japan had this weird two-tier system where people who lived in big cities got real LEGO and people who lived in small towns didn't. But Olo bricks weren't the only thing Japan got that no one else did. From 1997 to 2004, a Japanese candy company called Kabaya partnered with LEGO to sell miniature sets packaged inside boxes of candy. They sold sets from Bionicle, Rock Raiders, Life on Mars, Ninja, Star Wars, and more. And they were all sold in candy wrappers. Some of these even had exclusive content that never showed up anywhere else. The Rock Raiders Kabaya 4-pack came with a Chief minifigure that's never been in any other LEGO product anywhere. The only way to get him was to buy Japanese candy in the early 2000s. But while Japan was getting exclusive candy sets, Europe and America were getting the same sets with completely different lore behind them. In 1999, LEGO released a theme called Slyzers in Europe. All 8 characters lived on the same planet, and they were split into different biomes. But in the US and Canada, the exact same sets were sold as Throwbots, and in this version, each character lived on their own separate planet. There were different character names, different backstories, different box art, all of it was different. Fire became Torch, Sub became Scuba, Amazon became Jungle, even the illustrations were different. Enemies in the Throwbots version had their faces and eyes removed compared to the Slyzer versions. American and European kids in 1999 were playing with the exact same toys, but at the same time, everything about them was completely different, and no one even knew it. But the 12-volt electric train era is a big one, because American LEGO fans never got it at all, and they're still mad about it. The 12-volt train system ran from 1969 to 1991, and was a Europe exclusive the entire time. Sets like the Intercity Train, the High-Speed Express, none of them were ever sold in American stores. The Blue Track version was even more exclusive, only being available in continental Europe, not even the UK or Australia. The reason comes down to LEGO's licensing agreement with Samsonite, who was manufacturing LEGO products for North America at the time. After that arrangement ended in the early 1970s, train sales in the US essentially stopped until 1980, when a limited 4.5 volt line popped up. The 12-volt system, which needed special track conductors, never made the jump. So there's a whole era of LEGO trains that an entire continent just never experienced. But even European buyers weren't all getting the same train experience, because from 1977 through the mid-1980s, LEGO train sets came with sticker sheets that had the logos of different European railway companies. DB for Germany, SNCF for France, OBB for Austria, the list goes on. The box art always showed the German DB stickers applied by default, but if you bought your train set in Finland, you got Finnish railway stickers, Switzerland got Swiss ones, and every other country got their corresponding logo. It's the only time in LEGO history where the decoration of a set changed based on where you bought it. Now, I mentioned Samsonite earlier, and because of them, the Canadian LEGO situation is genuinely its own chapter in LEGO history. From 1962 to 1990, Canadians buying LEGO were buying sets manufactured by Samsonite under a license. And these sets weren't always identical to what the rest of the world was getting. Sometimes the parts were slightly different, sets were in blister packs instead of boxes, and everything had French and English text because of Canadian language laws. So for almost 30 years, Canadian kids were building with a local version of LEGO that was basically the same, but technically different. And because Canada was stuck with Samsonite, it got left behind when updates hit. In 1986, the rest of the world switched from 9-stud road plates to 7-stud road plates with a bike lane. But Canada kept the 9-stud road plates until 1989, 3 years after everyone else switched. Even after the Samsonite situation got sorted out, the US still wasn't getting the same LEGO experience as Europe. From roughly 1970 to 1980, the same exact set was sold with a completely different number in the US versus Europe. The London bus was set 384 in Europe and 760 in the US. Same bus, same parts, different number on the box. LEGO never officially explained why, and it's caused decades of confusion for collectors trying to catalog these things. And at the same time, while the rest of the world was buying Technic, Americans were buying something called Expert Builder. Every other market got the Technic branding, but the US got Expert Builder, and kept it well into the mid-80s before LEGO finally gave up and changed it to Technic. If you grew up in the US during that era and someone mentioned Technic, you might not have even known what they were talking about. But when Bionicle launched in 2001, European sets came with mini CDs that had game content on them. People in America didn't get anything like this for most of the early days of Bionicle. The Toa Metru sets from 2004 all had character-specific promo CDs in their European canisters, with no US equivalent. Since then, collectors have documented the differences at an obsessive level of detail. Different item numbers on European versus US canisters, black and white versus color disc variants, and which specific characters got CDs in which markets. Even the Bionicle collectible mask packs from 2001 were different depending on where you bought them. North America got set 8525, which came in a box, but the rest of the world got set 8530, which came in a poly bag. Same masks, different set numbers, different packaging. It's only right though. After that whole fiasco with the CDs, we needed something cool that other people weren't gonna get. But the changes with Bionicles still aren't done. LEGO managed to tell the same story in the complete wrong order depending on which continent you lived in. The 2005 wave had heroes, the Toa Hordeca, and villains, the Visorak. In North America, the Toa Hordeca were introduced in the winter, and the Visorak came out in the summer. But in Europe and Asia, it was flipped. Visorak came in winter, and Toa Hordeca came in summer. So European kids met the villains before they'd been introduced to the heroes they were fighting. At least this time, the story was the same. But that same year, the Toa Haga figures, Norik and Iruini, were released in stores in Europe in the winter of 2005. In the US, they were only available as a Walmart exclusive special edition Guardian Toa bonus pack. So one part of the world could walk into any store and buy them, while the other had to go to Walmart specifically or completely miss out. But the thing is, Knights Kingdom 2 did something similar. The action figures, like set 8773, came with game cards in North America. The The European version of the same figure came without cards. But then, Target stores in North America got a secret third variant with 6 cards instead of the standard 3. But at least this was for a random theme no one remembers, right? Well, yes, but LEGO did it with Ninjago too. The Ninjago trading card game launched in 2016 through a company called Blue Ocean, and it's been running across Europe, Brazil, and Singapore ever since. Notice anything? Yeah, it's never been available in the United States or Canada. There are more than 10 series with hundreds of different cards, and American Ninjago fans have just never had access to it. But even within Europe, it wasn't consistent. The UK dropped it after Series 3, while Hungary kept getting English versions even after the UK stopped getting them. Certain limited edition cards were only distributed through specific products in specific countries. It's a whole complicated mess that honestly isn't even worth trying to figure out. But the LEGO architecture theme has a weird origin story that most people haven't heard. When Adam Reed Tucker launched the first architecture sets in 2008, the Sears Tower and the John Hancock Center, they were sold exclusively at the gift shops of those actual buildings in Chicago. You had to physically visit the John Hancock Center or the Sears Tower depending on which set you wanted. That's a level of location-based exclusivity that no one besides LEGO themselves even gets, like the sets in the LEGO house. And speaking of LEGO house, during COVID, LEGO put some of the house sets for sale online, but for some reason, they weren't available for everyone. The architecture set was available across Europe. The Tree of Creativity and the Dinosaurs sets were only in Denmark, the UK, and Ireland, because those were the only countries where the packaging met local regulation requirements. And get this, the US and Australia got nothing. Nothing? This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to buy sets for retail price online that you can only get in person in one place. And for some reason, LEGO left out 2 gigantic markets. The problem is, this kind of thing goes all the way back to 1967. Set 080 was a town and train hybrid set that you could buy at any regular toy store in Europe. But in the US, the same exact set was sold exclusively at FAO Schwarz, the most expensive luxury toy store in America at the time. They even changed the name to the Ambassador set, when literally everything about them was the same. But in America, you had to be rich to buy it. And then there's the one that genuinely baffles people when they hear it. The LEGO Architecture White House set, released in 2020, launched in Europe and Asia before it was released in America. A set of the literal White House was available in Germany 2 months before you could buy it in the States. And apparently, the reason was because factories in Mexico were closing down due to COVID. Honestly, I hate how good of an excuse this is, because it really does make sense. But the Brick Architect said it best. It was a misguided decision to release a model featuring an iconic US landmark to a domestic audience 2 months later than it was released in Europe and Asia. But to finish the video, let me tell you about the Royal Guard minifigure. I think we can all agree that this is a cool minifigure, but if you want it, you have to go to Hamleys toy store in London to buy it. You literally can't get it anywhere else in the world unless you pay the resale price. Oh, and another thing, it hasn't been sold there since 2018, so you have to buy resale whether you like it or not. And speaking of things nobody likes, stickers are absolutely everywhere in LEGO. This is everyone's least favorite part of a LEGO set. You try your best to get it on straight, just like how it is in the instructions, but it's always just a little bit off. These things have gotten way more common in today's sets, but it wasn't always like this. LEGO fans all over the internet talk about how it feels like there are way more stickers in sets than there ever used to be, but finding the actual evidence is pretty difficult. The best I got is this picture of a tile piece that I don't even know the name of, but it's a perfect example of what's been going on. Another element that's been phased out over the years are wires, but this one is probably for the best. These days, most of the motors are battery powered, but back in the day, they had to be hooked up to a power source just so they could run. They were mostly used in the Power Functions theme, and since it started back in 2008, it makes sense why LEGO wasn't really making wireless stuff yet. A big change that was hiding right under our noses though, was the disappearance of fabric capes. These things were in basically every set I wanted when I was a kid. Jedis wore capes, and so did superheroes, so I was putting these things on minifigures all the time back in the day. As of recently though, LEGO's been starting to phase them out. A bunch of different minifigures have rubber capes now. There's Batman in the Harley Quinn and Mr. Freeze fight set, Magneto in the X-Men Mansion set, and Thor in the Thor vs. Surtur construction figure set. As cool as these pieces look, they kind of limit what LEGO's able to do with them. Back in the 1990s, they introduced this multicolored dragon cape in the system theme, which looks sick, but if they tried to do this with the new rubber capes, I feel like it wouldn't look as good. But there's something about capes that I completely missed, and it has to do with the Elves theme. This theme was around from 2015 to 2018, and since it doesn't have regular minifigures, of course, I never paid attention to it. But for some reason, these weird minifigs got capes with 3 holes. They're all over the theme and have been used for a lot of different minifigs, and they even have some more holes at the bottom. I guess this update is kind of hit or miss, but this next one was an absolute downgrade, no doubt. Do you notice how there aren't really any shiny pieces in LEGO anymore? There used to be a bunch of them, on lightsaber hilts, vintage crowns for the castle theme, and even on certain minifigures, but we just don't get them anymore. Luckily, there is an actual explanation for this one. Basically, because the paint LEGO was using wasn't the best quality, it peeled off pretty fast. So at one point or another, they just started using a color called Metal Light Gray for silver, and a bunch of different ones for gold. They don't look anywhere near as good, and to be honest, I feel like LEGO should have just found a better chrome paint to use. Am I spinning here? I feel like that definitely would have been the better move, but let me know what you think. Moving on from chrome pieces though, LEGO actually made a super small update to their bricks somewhat recently. After they patented the stud and tube coupling system in 1958, the bricks were much better at keeping themselves together. But looking at this brick today, something just seems off about it, right? Well, it's because they hadn't added the support beams to the tubes yet. This became very common around 2008, so it makes sense why when I look at bricks that don't have these beams, they almost look naked. LEGO doesn't just make tiny updates to pieces though, they do it to minifigures too. Back in the early 2000s, you could buy a magnetic minifigure that didn't have this giant brick podium underneath it. They made a few different sets, but the most popular one was the LEGO Batman set. But what was wrong with these minifigures? If they were so cool, why did they end up changing it? Well, the magnets were actually little pieces in the back of the minifigure's legs, and once parents of young kids found out about it, they weren't too happy. LEGO had to stop making magnetic minifigures this way because it was a choking hazard, which is honestly a shame. The seamless look these Batman minifigures have compared to the ones we have now is so much better. Depending on what you're looking at, sometimes the old LEGO really was just better. And a perfect example of that is what LEGO did to the box design for LEGO Castle. The castle theme always had a blue sky with clouds in the background on the box. It was a super nice design for the theme, and it was a surefire way to know that you were buying a castle set. LEGO Castle has actually been retired since 2016 now, but because of how famous it was, they turned it into a sub-theme of the Icon series in 2022. Now, I don't have any problems with the sets in this sub-theme. In fact, I think the Lion Knight's castle is one of the coolest LEGO castles ever, but every set in the Icons theme comes in a blacked out box. Now, they didn't do that for this set in particular, but if you're going to change the design on the box, why not give it the classic blue sky that everyone knows and loves? This change didn't really make sense to me, but LEGO fans had it way worse than this before 1990. This is going to sound crazy, but LEGO didn't make the first brick separator until that year. So before then, if you had two 1x2 plate pieces stacked on top of each other, you were basically cooked. But even then, we didn't get the one we have now until 2011. For some reason, all they did was change the color a few different times over the years, then come out of nowhere with the orange one in 2011. If you were playing with LEGO before the 90s, you definitely would have noticed this update. So let me show you something I guarantee you haven't noticed. This is a transparent brick. Looks pretty good, right? Well, what if I told you that this is actually an old design, and that most of the transparent bricks these days look like this? Yeah, I know. This downgrade is up there with the chrome change. I mean, why would you want to make transparent bricks less transparent? Now, don't get me wrong, certain sets have bricks that are super see-through, but that's definitely not the case for all of them. I can't lie, I've been hating on LEGO pretty hard with these last few updates, so let me show you one that was actually one of the best moves they've ever made. Obviously, we all know how LEGO instructions work. You look at the page and it tells you what to do. But back in the day, this was definitely not the case. These are a couple pages of instructions for set 948 from 1978. I mean, this is basically a free-for-all. There are a few arrows pointing you in the right direction, but for the most part, you're completely on your own. This isn't even as bad as it gets, though. Let me show you the difference between the original Forest Men hideout set from 1988 versus the remastered one from 2022. These are a few pages from the 2022 version. Nothing out of the ordinary, of course. But look at the pages from the one from 1988. I mean, this is just crazy. The difference between page 2 and 4 is out of this world, and they barely even told you anything. Like I said, this update was 100% needed, so let's take a look at another one. This is a police officer minifigure from 1978, but I bet you already knew that. This guy looks old. There isn't a whole lot going on with this minifigure, so when you compare it to one of the police officers we have today, it's a night and day difference. I'd be super surprised if any of you missed this change over the years, but I had to throw it in here, because imagine LEGO released a minifigure with this amount of detail today. There'd be an entire mob outside their HQ. Something people should riot over, though, is LEGO taking away light-up bricks. Specifically, light-up lightsabers for LEGO Star Wars. I've been a LEGO Star Wars fan my whole life, and I completely missed this update. Back in the early 2000s, they released a special type of Star Wars minifigure. All you had to do was put a stud on the back of the hilt and push the head down. Then the lightsaber would come to life. I genuinely can't believe I missed something as cool as this, especially since I literally could have gotten some when I was a kid. But I guess it just goes to show how sneaky LEGO can be. Another element they added then slowly took away like this were Legoland pamphlets showing off their new sets. I'm not exactly sure when they started putting these in boxes, and honestly, I'm not even sure when they stopped. All I do know is that they did it before and they don't do it now. Pretty much every single one of these pamphlets is considered to be vintage LEGO, which means they probably haven't done it since before the year 2000. These pamphlets had all sorts of cool looking promo for sets that were coming out soon. Like, look at this one I found on eBay. There's promo for sets from a bunch of different themes. Space, pirates, Technic, it's all the classics. This wasn't the only thing that was common with old boxes though. LEGO also used to show off a bunch of different ways to build a set on the box. I'm not talking about a 3-in-1 set though, where the entire point is to build it one way, take it apart, and build it another way with the help of instructions. These builds were put there purely to spark the imagination. These days, it kind of feels like LEGO only makes sets that are meant to be built once, then put on display. But back in the day, they were super dedicated to the play features, and wanted people to make all sorts of cool stuff with their bricks, no matter what the instructions said. We don't really see that too often these days, and I doubt they're ever bringing it back. But if there's anything that LEGO was doing before that they might actually bring back one day, it's what I'm about to show you next. Back in the 90s, LEGO collabed with Kellogg's, the cereal brand. And I'm not too sure what gets put in cereal boxes these days, but back in my day, there was always some cool toy or prize that you had a chance of winning. The only way to find out was to open the box and pray. And back in the 90s, you might have gotten lucky enough to see a polybag for a Toucan Sam set fall out. It wasn't just him though. You also had a chance of winning Tony the Tiger or the Keebler Man. All three of these sets are super uncommon now, and I wasn't even born when they were around. But this is something I could definitely see LEGO coming back to. Something they're absolutely never doing again though is painting directly onto pieces instead of using a print. Let me show you what I mean. Not too long ago, it wasn't uncommon for LEGO to use paint on certain pieces. They did this a lot with head accessories for minifigures, but the most obvious ones were the headdresses in the LEGO Indians theme. This design is clearly painted on, not printed, and it's become so rare that a certain minifigure in LEGO Star Wars is worth an insane amount of money, simply because the headpiece was painted. It's in the Cloud City set, which was already exclusive, so that definitely helps drive up the price. But I'm talking about the Boba Fett minifigure. The design on his helmet was painted on, instead of printed, like how most minifigures were in 2003. This is the only Boba Fett minifigure that has this design style, and because of it, it's worth over $2,000. And the set it's in is worth over $8,000. Like I said though, I don't think they're ever bringing this back. And another thing that's in the same boat are 32 by 32 base plates. At one point or another, LEGO completely phased out adding base plates to their sets, and it's been like this for so long that I bet you didn't even know they did it in the first place. Literally the only theme that still has them is the modular buildings theme, and that's because if they didn't, the sets wouldn't be modular. From the 1970s to the 1990s, LEGO was including these things in a bunch of different sets. It's in the police headquarters from 1979, the Shell service station from 1983, the airport set from 1985, and way more. It's been in 102 different sets in total, most of which were released in that 20-year period. So it's safe to say that if it's not modular, it's not getting one of these base plates. We can all agree that it'd be nice to have a few of these things laying around. But sometimes LEGO makes something super sick, adds it to a few sets, then retires it for good. Back in 1993, they released the Imperial flagship set in the Pirates theme, and as cool as the ship is, I want to focus on just one singular piece. You see this compass right here? It might look like a regular printed compass piece, but it actually works. This was the first set to ever have this piece, but the thing is, only 9 other sets in LEGO history have ever included this piece. The last ones being the Spaniard ship and the pirate battleship in 2001. This piece never got the love it deserved, and as cool as it is, I don't think it ever will. It was directed by Michel Gondry, and the whole thing is a stop-motion LEGO animation. Every single frame was shot with real physical bricks, and in between each frame, the crew had to move the bricks ever so slightly to simulate movement. The song is only 1 minute and 50 seconds long, but the amount of work that went into making the video is genuinely insane. But here's where it gets good. The White Stripes actually wanted LEGO to be officially involved. They reached out to the company hoping to get a small LEGO set sent out with each copy of the song, something fans could use to build their own versions of Jack and Meg. Unfortunately, LEGO turned them down, and their reason was that they didn't market their products to people over the age of 12. If only they knew how wrong they'd be like 20 years later. Regardless, the band just bought a bunch of LEGO bricks and made the video anyway. It went on to win 3 MTV VMAs in 2002, including Best Visual Effects and Best Editing. And after it became a massive hit, LEGO apparently came back to try and work with them, but Jack White turned them down. Now, speaking of LEGO being somewhere nobody expected it, the 1989 Disney movie Honey, I Shrunk the Kids has one of the most memorable uses of a single LEGO piece ever. The way it happened was that 4 kids accidentally got shrunk to 1/4 of an inch by a machine in the attic, and they ended up stranded in the backyard. At some point, they found a blue LEGO brick lying in the grass, and at that size, a standard LEGO brick is basically the size of a building. So they climbed inside it and used it as shelter for the night. It was on screen for a good amount of time, and it was completely unsponsored. But LEGO showing up unsponsored is one thing. Having an art department spend 2 weeks building something for a single scene is a totally different ballgame. In the Christmas movie Elf, there's a scene where Buddy decorates a Gimbel's department store overnight, and as part of his decoration, he builds the entire New York City skyline out of LEGO. According to director Jon Favreau, the art department spent over 2 weeks building it, just for it to be on screen for a few seconds. It's one of those details most people don't think twice about, but it was a huge deal for the people who had to build it. Now, most of the time when LEGO shows up in media, it's either a cameo or a prop. But in 2024, an entire documentary was made using nothing but LEGO animation. Piece by Piece is Pharrell Williams' autobiography documentary, directed by Morgan Neville, and his entire life story is told and animated in LEGO. Every interview, every memory, every person, they're all minifigures. We've known for a while that Pharrell loves LEGO, but this documentary absolutely sealed the deal. But now, let me tell you about something that was planned across 3 movies over the course of 5 years that involves the LEGO Death Star. In Spider-Man Homecoming from 2017, there's a scene early in the movie where Ned is at school, showing Peter an Emperor Palpatine minifigure and asking if he wants to come over and build his brand new Death Star together. Peter has to turn him down because of his Stark internship, which is the first real sign that he's giving up fun for his superhero lifestyle. So LEGO is literally used as the thing Peter sacrifices to be Spider-Man. Then later on, Ned is in Peter's room building the set without him. But when Peter crawls through the window in his Spider-Man suit, Ned drops it out of sheer shock, and it shatters all over the floor. The funny part about this, though, is that Tom Holland revealed in an interview that the crew went through 7 copies of the set, because Jacob Batalon kept dropping it too early during takes. However, in No Way Home, the Death Star comes back, but it's only half finished this time, and it's sitting on a shelf in Happy's condo, and it gets destroyed again. But the director, John Watts, did this on purpose. The Death Star gets fully built and destroyed in Homecoming, it's nowhere to be found in Far From Home, and it comes back half finished and gets destroyed again in No Way Home. This is exactly what happened in the 3 movies from the original Star Wars trilogy, making this one of the most discreet references in any Marvel movie. Clearly, this takes a lot of planning, but sometimes LEGO shows up in the MCU with a lot less thought behind it, and it's still funny. In Age of Ultron, the Avengers go to Hawkeye's family farmhouse, and when they walk into the living room, Thor steps on some Lego pieces that his kids left on the floor. He freezes, Captain America notices, and Thor very awkwardly sweeps the pieces under a chair with his foot to cover it up. And they just move on. Not a single word is said, and the whole thing plays out in about 10 seconds. But moving over to TV, let's talk about the most famous LEGO appearance on this entire list. In 2014, The Simpsons aired their 550th episode, and they used it to do something they've been working on for 2 years. The episode is called Brick Like Me, and the premise is that Homer wakes up in a LEGO version of Springfield, where everything and everyone is made of bricks. The story is actually about him having to choose between staying in a perfect LEGO world where Lisa never grows up, or going back to real life and accepting that she will. The whole episode took twice as long to make as a regular Simpsons episode, because every single character had to be rebuilt as a 3D model and animated. But here's what makes this really interesting. The idea actually started because LEGO went to Fox and pitched a collab so they could make a set based on the Simpsons house. But Fox came back and said, forget the set, let's do an entire episode. So they started writing it. What they didn't know though, because LEGO never told them, was that the LEGO movie was being made at the exact same time as this episode. The Simpsons team found out way too late to change anything, so they snuck in a little nod to the movie right at the end. But while The Simpsons did an entire episode, Family Guy has referenced LEGO in different ways in so many different episodes. The first one is from season 5 in an episode called The Tan Aquatic with Steve Zissou. The main plot is Peter turning into a bully after getting involved with Chris's bully. But one of the cutaways is an argument between Peter and Lois about how different LEGO is from Mega Bloks.
Lois only buys me Mega Bloks.
They're the same thing, Peter.
If you've liked LEGO long enough, you know this is a real argument that people have all the time. So it's not like Family Guy was making anything up. But in season 17, there's another cutaway that's just as real. In this episode, Stewie makes a new friend that actually starts turning him into a normal kid. He wants to give up all his weapons, and he even asks Brian if his friend can come over for a play date. Brian is super surprised by this, since Stewie's never done this before. And Stewie says there's a first time for everything, like when he built the Leaning Tower of Pisa out of LEGO. Now, even though Family Guys doesn't look like it, there is a real version of this set that came out in 2013. They probably just couldn't copy it one-to-one for copyright reasons. But the best Family Guy LEGO moment might be from season 15. Quagmire gets the guys free flights to San Francisco using his employee discount, and he invites them up to the cockpit. But while they're up there, they find out he's been using autopilot to take breaks. And Joe points out that he apparently had enough free time to build the 10,000-piece LEGO Hogwarts in the cockpit. There's even another bit where Peter calls Dumbledore Gandalf and Quagmire corrects him. But let's not ignore the fact that Quagmire would rather build Hogwarts than fly his plane. Anyways, another LEGO moment is in season 17, in an episode where Lois gets inspired by a book about decluttering, and she turns into an absolute clean freak. In one of the cutaways in this episode, she takes Chris and Meg's hats off because she thinks the hats are making more clutter. And underneath them, they both have LEGO heads with studs on top and everything. Now, Family Guy uses LEGO for cutaway jokes, but The Big Bang Theory treated it as a completely normal hobby for their main character. Across multiple episodes, Sheldon references building the Death Star as his LEGO fun time. And in season 6, Howard casually says that it took Sheldon 2 full years to build it. The set does have over 3,800 pieces, but 2 years for one LEGO set is an unreal amount of time. But on the show Friends, LEGO Lego was in the background multiple times and never even talked about by anyone. Bionicle spent multiple seasons sitting in Joey and Chandler's apartment and nobody said a word about it. Lego fans on Reddit got so into it that they made a catalog of all the appearances. One of the most popular ones was in Season 8, Episode 12, when the Wairuha combination model showed up. That's the figure you build by combining Kopaka with Lua and Gali, using instructions from all three sets. Bionicle launched in 2001, which lines up perfectly with the later seasons of Friends. But 30-year-olds building Bionicle is still pretty funny. But while Bionicle was just a background prop in Friends, someone on the writing team for The Flash used Lego in a very creative way. In Season 3, Episode 11, the team is trying to figure out how to stop Savitar from killing Iris in a future timeline they've already seen. So Caitlin and Cisco build a full Lego diorama, recreating the exact scene so the team can study it and work out how to save her. Using kids' toys to plan a rescue mission is a very interesting decision, but it works really well because apparently Lego is really good at recreating a crime scene. Now, most of these appearances involve Lego in some kind of meaningful way. But South Park did something more low-key. In Season 15, Episode 7, it's Stan's 10th birthday. Butters gives him a present, and it's set 7365, the four-wheel drive with horse trailer, a real Lego City set from 2009. Knowing South Park, I'm just glad they didn't do something way worse. But the most low-key Lego appearance on this list is probably in Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide. One of the three main characters, named Cookie, wears glasses in literally every episode, but they're not just any glasses. Cookie is pretty much a nerd, so he modified his glasses to be more high-tech and functional. And if you look closely at the frames, part of this mod is made with a piece from Bionicle. Production never said anything about it, so it took people on Reddit noticing it and bringing it into the limelight for anyone to say anything. This was timed pretty well for this show, since it started in 2004. But what happened in Futurama was the exact opposite. In the second episode, Fry and Leela's spacesuits have emblems on them, and they're pretty much identical to the classic space logo. The show is set in the year 3000, which means Lego's classic space aesthetic apparently survived for over 1,000 years. But a deeper Futurama Lego moment comes in the Season 6 premiere, Rebirth. The whole episode is about what happens after the crew gets killed crashing back through a wormhole. Leela doesn't die, but she falls into an irreversible coma, and Fry, who can't cope, builds a robot version of her just to feel better. Then halfway through the episode, it's revealed that Fry himself is also a robot. The real Fry died protecting Leela during the crash, and Leela built a robot version of him because she couldn't cope either. In the scenes with Robot Fry, if you look at his desk, there are tiny hand-built Lego figures of himself and Leela just sitting there. He might have done this so they could always be together, which is really sad. But Pixar went in the exact opposite direction. In Toy Story 3, when Woody and the gang first get to Sunnyside Daycare, if you look at the toys living there, you'll see minifigures mixed in with everyone else. Pixar animated them with rigid movement, exactly how minifigures would actually move. No bending and no flexibility. Then in the Toy Story short Hawaiian Vacation from 2011, minifigures show up again as background characters helping Barbie and Ken unpack their bags. The reason both of these happened is almost certainly because of Angus MacLane, because when he actually directed something himself at Pixar, he went all in. In 2013, he directed Toy Story of Terror, a Halloween special where Bonnie's toys end up trapped in a motel and slowly start disappearing. One of the toys is Lego Bunny, a rabbit made entirely out of Lego bricks who can rebuild himself into different shapes. MacLane built the original Lego Bunny himself from his own personal brick collection before it was ever scanned into the computer. And after the special came out, he submitted the design to Lego Ideas, trying to get it made into an official set. Unfortunately, he never got $10,000. 1,000 votes, so LEGO didn't even get to review it. But clearly, this guy is a massive LEGO enthusiast, so it's awesome that he worked on such famous movies and gave us LEGO fans something to be excited about. Back in 2010, LEGO released the Grand Emporium set in the modular buildings theme, but during the production run, they changed the mold for a certain flower piece, and they switched it from a hollow stud to a solid one. Now, on the surface, this seems like a tiny change that wouldn't matter, but here's the problem. The instructions for the Grand Emporium required attaching this flower by putting a bar through the hollow stud. So when people bought newer copies of the set and got the updated solid version, they physically could not complete the build. The piece just didn't work the way the instructions said it should. LEGO ended up shipping out the older flower pieces to people who contacted them and complained, but they never made any kind of public announcement about it. And that's not the only piece that got quietly changed without anyone being told. The 1x2 jumper plate, which is legitimately one of the most used pieces in all of LEGO, has been redesigned twice over the years. In 2004, they added a groove to it. Then in 2010, they replaced the pin on the underside with a stud holder. This second change completely altered how the piece connected to other bricks. So if you were using building techniques from before 2010, they just didn't work the same way on newer jumper plates. And LEGO never told anyone this was happening. Builders just had to figure it out through trial and error. But jumper plates aren't the only thing that got updated in secret. The stud on top of minifigures' heads has actually been changed 3 separate times. It started as a solid stud, then became a blocked hollow stud in 1993, and then got changed again to a concave stud around 2006. These changes affect how accessories, hair pieces, and hats attach to it, and they also affect how certain building techniques work when you're using heads as connection points. The really crazy part, though, is that all 3 versions technically use the same mold in LEGO's system, which makes tracking these changes super difficult. And speaking of minifigure heads, you might not have realized that the classic smiley face from back in the day has been slowly retired over the years. If you grew up in the early 2000s like me, you wouldn't have noticed at all, since the popular themes were all licensed, and LEGO was using custom faceplates for basically every minifigure. But just 15 years earlier, this faceplate was the only thing you saw. The biggest giveaway that the classic smiley was being phased out was when LEGO released the Downtown Diner set in 2018. When it got announced the year before, hardcore fans noticed that the minifigures all had these brand new faceplates with white in their eyes. AFL Wells talked about it so much online that LEGO made an official statement about the new faceplates. They basically said that they've been upping the quality of the modular buildings theme a lot over the last 10 years, so they thought it was finally time for the minifigures to get an upgrade too. I'm not exactly sure where LEGO said this, but you can find it on multiple review websites, so it's definitely legit. But not every minifigure head change was about something retiring. The first double-sided minifigure head, which is now standard in basically every theme, was introduced with absolutely no announcement all the way back in 2001. Professor Quirrell from the Harry Potter theme had Voldemort's face printed on the back of his head, and that was the very first time LEGO ever made a double-sided head. Fans just bought the set, built the minifigure, and noticed when they happened to turn the head around. But now, let me show you a change that happened in the middle of a production run and completely changed what minifigure was inside a certain set. In 2017, LEGO released the Resistance Bomber set from Star Wars: The Last Jedi. It came with a generic minifigure literally just called Resistance Bomber Pilot, who was a random minifigure in pilot gear. But when The Last Jedi actually came out, fans who saw the movie realized that the pilot who flew that specific bomber was a character named Finch Dallow. And when people compared LEGO's minifigure to Finch, they looked nothing alike. So LEGO went back and redesigned the entire minifigure mid-production run. They updated the box art, the instructions, and started shipping the new version in 2019. But of course, they never made an announcement about this. They just started shipping the new version. So depending on exactly when you bought this set, you got a completely different minifigure inside the box. The craziest part though is that the Finch Dallow minifig sells for over $1,300 on the aftermarket. But now, let me show you a minifigure change that only happened because LEGO didn't have the right colors at first. In 2001, when the first wave of Harry Potter sets came out, LEGO only had classic yellow for minifigure skin tones. But Professor Snape was specifically described in the books as being pale, and obviously yellow didn't really capture that. So they decided to give him a fluorescent green head because that was the closest color they had at the time. And he actually stayed green for years. Even after LEGO started giving other characters realistic skin tones in 2004, Snape was still walking around with a green head for a while. Eventually, they did fix it and gave him a pale skin tone. But for a while there, Snape looked absolutely ridiculous. And speaking of Harry Potter characters getting changed, Dumbledore's robes have been changed so many different times that it's genuinely hard to keep track of all the versions. In the actual movies, Dumbledore's signature look is deep purple robes, and LEGO's first version of him in 2001 did use purple, but then they just kept changing it for some reason. He showed up in pink robes for the Prisoner of Azkaban sets, then he had bright blue robes for the Goblet of Fire wave, then in 2018, when they rebooted the theme, he got light blue robes with silver accents. And here's the weird part about all this. The blue robes are actually what Dumbledore wears in the original books, not in the movies. So LEGO kept giving him the book-accurate colors for sets that were supposed to be based on the movies. Even the LEGO Harry Potter video game always showed him wearing purple robes in all the cutscenes. But Harry Potter isn't the only licensed theme LEGO made changes to. The Simpsons Quickie Mart set from 2015 is missing one of the most iconic things from the entire show, Duff Beer. This beer is absolutely everywhere in The Simpsons. It's always on the shelves every time the Quickie Mart is on screen. And it's so iconic that it even had its own theme park ride. But when you look at LEGO's Quickie Mart set, it has a full interior with shelves and products with no Duff beer anywhere. Instead, all the fridges are stocked with bottles of Buzz Cola, which is a fake soda from the show. And LEGO's alcohol policy is the exact reason why Moe's Tavern has never been made as an official set, even though it's one of the most iconic spots in The Simpsons. In a 2014 interview with Collider, LEGO's VP of Design, Matthew James Ashton, directly said, "We try to avoid anything alcohol related within our products, especially targeting kids. But LEGO's censorship doesn't stop with alcohol. They also have a strict no smoking policy." The Jurassic Park T-Rex Rampage set from 2019 was a massive set that cost $250, and one of the minifigures in it was Ray Arnold, the character played by Sam L. Jackson. In the original movie, Ray Arnold has a cigarette in his mouth in pretty much every scene he's in. It's genuinely part of his identity as a character. But when LEGO made his minifigure, they obviously left it out. The Brick Fans review of the set directly noted, one thing that is missing from the printing is his cigarette. So people definitely noticed. But this exact same thing happened with the X-Files set too. There's a character in the X-Files literally called the Cigarette Smoking Man. His entire name is based on the fact that he chain smokes throughout the entire series. When the X-Files set passed a review on LEGO Ideas, the designer told Gold Derby in an interview that he intentionally left out cigarettes from the design. He said, "I was cautious to include cigarettes or anything smoking related, and specifically didn't include his trademark pack of Morley cigarettes." But not only did they leave them out, they also changed the character's name to the Syndicate Leader on the packaging to avoid even using a name that references smoking. Obviously, LEGO has a very strict policy when it comes to this stuff. But now, let me show you something that got censored for a completely different reason. The Stranger Things theme is one of LEGO's most popular themes right now, and obviously Eleven's nosebleed is one of the most iconic things in the entire show. But when LEGO made her minifigure for the Upside Down set in 2019, they matched every detail to her disguise in Season 1, besides her nosebleed. A commenter on Brickset's review specifically called this the biggest miss of the set. The ironic part though is that LEGO made a Demogorgon headpiece with its mouth open, which is way scarier than a little nosebleed. But some of the weirdest censorship happens in the LEGO video games. In the movie Avengers Age of Ultron, Quicksilver sacrifices himself by taking a bunch of bullets for Hawkeye, and he dies from his injuries. It's a super serious and tragic death scene, but in the LEGO Marvel's Avengers video game, this scene plays out completely differently. Quicksilver gets pelted with ice cream cones instead of bullets and falls over onto the ground. And if you look closely, he's still breathing while he's lying there. Brickopedia calls this the most infamous censored death in the entire game, which makes sense because of how sad it was in the movies. LEGO does stuff like this all the time though. In LEGO Indiana Jones The Original Adventures from 2008, a major scene from the Temple of Doom just got completely removed. In the movie, the villain Mola Ram rips a man's heart directly out of his chest while he's fully alive and conscious, and then lowers him into a lava pit to die. This scene was so disturbing that when the movie came out, it literally helped create the PG-13 rating. But in the original Adventures video game, the heart sacrifice ritual is just gone. It doesn't even happen. There are a lot of ways for LEGO to censor different things in video games. I mean, they do it all the time in cutscenes, but I guess this one was just too far gone. However, the sequel game, LEGO Indiana Jones 2: The Adventure Continues, censored stuff in a way more creative and hilarious way. In Raiders of the Lost Ark, the scene where the villains open the Ark of the Covenant is absolutely terrifying. Faces melt off, heads explode, and spoiler alert, literally everyone dies. But in LEGO Indiana Jones 2, when the bad guys open the Ark, something completely different happens. A disco ball drops out of nowhere. Then dance music starts playing, and all the enemy soldiers start dancing to the music. Then, while they're dancing, the true power of the Ark activates and kills all of them with electrocution. So even though the scene did technically get censored, everyone still died anyway. I guess LEGO figured electrocution was more PG friendly. But sometimes LEGO gets lucky, and things they'd usually have to censor themselves. Here's what I mean. In LEGO Marvel Superheroes, one of the characters you can unlock is Ghost Rider. In the comics, this guy is an absolute demon, literally. He's a demon that bonded to a human soul. This obviously makes for a pretty scary looking character, one that LEGO might not want to show in all his glory. But luckily for them, he just doesn't look scary as a minifigure. When LEGO made him for the game, they included every detail: the skull, the outfit, the fire around his head, but he's nowhere near as scary as he is in the comics. However, there's one character in LEGO video games who's been censored more than anyone: Deadpool. WatchMojo literally lists him as the #1 most censored character across every LEGO Marvel video game. As a character, Deadpool is defined by graphic violence, adult jokes, and R-rated comedy. But in LEGO Marvel Superheroes, he's basically just a harmless comedian who takes you through bonus side missions in the game. All the graphic violence is gone, all the adult humor is gone, all the fourth wall breaks are toned down to a kid-friendly joke. He's a complete shell of his former self. And obviously, this all makes sense. I mean, there's no way LEGO would add all of that stuff to a kid's game. In 1999, Jar Jar Binks became the first LEGO minifigure in history to have a custom sculpted head. Before him, every single minifigure for over 20 years used the same headpiece. But Jar Jar's weird head obviously couldn't fit the standard mold, so LEGO had to make a totally new one just for him. And that single decision unlocked the door to everything that came after. Custom molded heads for Yoda, Chewbacca, other Wookiees, aliens, droids, and every other theme. All of it traces back to Jar Jar, but he wasn't the only Phantom Menace character who changed LEGO forever. From 1978 to 1999, every male LEGO minifigure had the same hairpiece. But when Qui-Gon Jinn showed up in the 1999 Phantom Menace sets, LEGO designed a totally new hairpiece just for him. It was the first new male hair mold in 2 decades. And just like Jar Jar's head, that single piece opened the door to every new hairpiece that came after it. But here's something crazy. LEGO Star Wars almost never happened at all. In 1997 and 1998, LEGO's own leadership nearly killed the Star Wars deal before it even started. The company had a long-standing policy against war toys, and several executives were super against licensing something literally called Star Wars. They were specifically worried about German mothers because market research showed that they were really worried about violence in kids' toys. The team pitching the deal had to strategically reframe Star Wars as a fantasy battle between good and evil instead of a space war story. But even with that framing, some execs still said no. It was so close to not happening that Kjeld Kurt Christensen himself had to personally greenlight it and push it through. The deal was finally signed in 1998 after 6 weeks of negotiations, and it was LEGO's first ever licensing agreement. And even after it got approved, the original 1998 licensing agreement between LEGO and Lucasfilm was only set to run until 2008 or 2009. When it got close to expiring, it wasn't guaranteed to continue. LEGO had to renegotiate, and they did, at first extending it to 2011, then 2016, then 2022. The license is now locked in through 2032, but for a while, LEGO Star Wars was scheduled to be a limited theme that would just stop. If the negotiations had fallen through in 2008, it would have just ended. But while the theme was still running in the mid-2000s, LEGO tried something that seems impossible now. In 2005, they made 5 special minifigures with built-in electronics: Anakin, Obi-Wan, Mace Windu, Luminara Unduli, and Darth Vader. You'd press their head down and the lightsaber they were holding would actually glow, but the trade-off was pretty brutal. The battery only lasted 3 hours in total, and the figures couldn't be disassembled at all, so the feature was quietly dropped after just 1 year. These minifigures were in a few different sets, and then LEGO never tried it again. But speaking of lightsabers, the hilts actually used to look way better. From 1999 to around 2005, every lightsaber hilt in LEGO Star Wars was shiny chrome silver, just like they are in the movies. But in 2005, they switched over to a medium stone gray for a few years, before eventually using a bunch of different types of colors. Today's sets mostly use a dull dark silver. The chrome version still shows up occasionally, but it's rare now. And the early chrome hilts are pretty valuable because of how much better they look. But the hilts aren't the only part of lightsabers that changed. From 1999 to 2011, every green lightsaber blade was transparent fluorescent green, which is a bright, slightly yellowish neon color. But in 2011, LEGO switched to transparent bright green, which is slightly darker and more saturated. And after that, they never went back. If you have lightsabers in both colors side by side, the difference is actually pretty noticeable. But most people who grew up with LEGO Star Wars have no idea this even happened because it was never announced anywhere. And speaking of quiet changes, Darth Vader's helmet actually got completely redesigned in 2015. From 1999 to 2014, Vader's helmet didn't change at all. Then in the Death Star Final Duel set, LEGO changed it to a 2-piece design with a separate neck piece and helmet that's way more accurate to the movies. Most people who grew up with the old helmet didn't even notice when it changed. But the funny part is that the 2019 20th anniversary sets brought back the original helmet, which was the first time LEGO admitted that the change had even happened. But now, let me show you something that's really easy to miss if you don't own both versions of it. The original Phase 1 Clone Trooper helmets from 2002 to 2007 had a cutout slit for the visor. There was a literal hole in the plastic, which meant you could see the black printed head underneath through the gap. In 2008, when the Clone Wars TV show sub-theme launched, LEGO redesigned the helmet, so the visor was fully printed on the piece with a proper face visible underneath it. This also made the clones feel more like actual people, since, you know, that's what they were. But the clones actually changed again in 2022, and it was surprisingly really meaningful. For most of LEGO Star Wars history, clone troopers had generic light-colored heads inside their helmets. But in 2020, with the 501st Legion Clone Troopers set, LEGO introduced a new head print with Maori and Polynesian-accurate skin tone to match actors Temuera Morrison and Daniel Logan, who played Jango and young Boba Fett. This was a really subtle but awesome change that most people just didn't catch when it happened. And that wasn't the only skin tone change either. For most of LEGO Star Wars history, realistic skin tone meant one color: light nougat, which was introduced in 2004. By 2020, it was still being used for 78% of all Star Wars skin tones. But in 2022, LEGO started using medium brown and medium tan across all licensed themes. Collectors only noticed when new figures started showing up with different looking skin. But now, let me talk about a feature that took forever to come to Star Wars: dual molded legs. The first Star Wars minifigure to get them was Han Solo in the Betrayal at Cloud City set in 2018, which is a really long time after LEGO Star Wars started, but LEGO designers actually had an explanation for it. Apparently, LEGO Star Wars minifigures in particular use a bunch of different types of plastic, so making dual molds for them is a lot more difficult than it is for other themes. They've slowly been rolling out to more characters since 2018, but there still aren't that many of them. But if you think this is bad, arm printing has existed in Star Wars for over 20 years and still isn't standard. The first Star Wars minifigure with printed arms was Boba Fett in the Cloud City set from 2003, and he's also the first minifigure with leg printing. That was over 20 years ago, but today, arm printing is still a premium feature that LEGO only adds where it really makes sense. In 2021, LEGO designers publicly confirmed this won't ever be universal because some printing machines physically can't do it, and they can't replace all of them at once. But in 2019, to mark 20 years of LEGO Star Wars, LEGO released 5 special sets, and they all came with a throwback minifigure with old school yellow skin. Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, Darth Vader with the original 1999 helmet, Princess Leia, and Lando Calrissian. These figures even used the original torso designs too, which is a really cool detail. It was the first time yellow-skinned Star Wars minifigures had shown up since 1999. But speaking of 1999, that's when the UCS theme started, and it was a lot different than it is now. The original UCS sets, like the TIE Interceptor and the X-Wing, had 0 minifigures. LEGO originally wanted UCS sets to be display models for adults, but they slowly realized that people didn't like this. By 2007, with the Ultimate Collector's Millennium Falcon, LEGO started including minifigures in UCS sets, and I think we can all agree that that was a really good decision. But that original UCS X-Wing has a weirdly funny secret. When designers needed a clear window for the cockpit, instead of making something new, they just repurposed the windscreen cover from a 4.5 volt battery box designed for LEGO train sets. It was basically a perfect fit. These days, we know that they did this to save money, since they didn't know how well the UCS theme would really do. But UCS wasn't the only alternate format LEGO tried. In 2009, they released the midi-scale Millennium Falcon, which was kind of stuck in the middle. It was a display set that was too small for minifigures, but too detailed to be a toy. It didn't do too well though, because after a Star Destroyer in 2010, there was nothing for over a decade. The format just vanished. But for the 25th anniversary in 2024, LEGO brought it back with 3 new midi-scale ships: the Millennium Falcon, the Tantive IV, and the Invisible Hand. LEGO abandoned this format for 14 years and then just decided to start making them again, like nothing happened. But this next format was so weird that it never came back. In 2002, LEGO released a TIE Fighter set in the mini sub theme, and it only had 12 pieces. It came in a poly bag, cost almost nothing, and was originally a promo for the LEGO Club. LEGO officially confirmed it as the smallest Star Wars set ever made, but there was also a hidden trick. If you bought 4 specific sets in the mini sub theme, the extra parts from all 4 4 of them could be built into a mini TIE bomber that didn't appear in any instructions. But if you thought that format was weird, in 2007, LEGO released a motorized version of the AT-AT. This thing actually walked forward and backward because it came with a motor, and it also had a head that moved up and down. It was LEGO's most expensive Star Wars set that year, besides the UCS Millennium Falcon. But here's the catch. It was only available directly from LEGO's catalog and website, not in regular stores. It became so popular that it went on permanent back order after Christmas in 2009, and those sets wouldn't ship out until June of 2010. It retired in 2010 and now sells for around $500 sealed, and LEGO's never made another motorized AT-AT since then. And speaking of things LEGO only tried once, in 2000 they launched a full sub-theme of large-scale Star Wars Technic sets. There was a pit droid, a battle droid, and a destroyer droid in the first wave. Then it kept going in 2001 with C-3PO and a stormtrooper. And then it ended in 2002 with Darth Vader, R2-D2, Jango Fett, and a super battle droid. After this, they never made another set for this sub-theme. The format just vanished. It was eventually replaced by the Buildable Figures Construction sub-theme in 2015, which also flopped and got canceled. So LEGO has tried twice to make large buildable Star Wars figures, and both times it didn't work. But now, let me tell you about something that's oddly specific. When LEGO released Kit Fisto in set 7661 back in 2007, his head tentacles couldn't be made out of plastic because they'd snap off. So LEGO had to improvise, and they decided to make him a rubber head instead. He was the first LEGO Star Wars minifigure with a non-plastic head, and only 2 others ever got the same treatment: Plo Koon and the Clone Wars animated version of Yoda. All 3 of them are from a short experimental window between 2007 and 2012, where LEGO was trying this out. But after 2012, they just stopped doing it. But the weirdest minifigure story in all of LEGO Star Wars is Jedi Bobs. In 2002, the Republic gunship set included an unnamed generic Jedi who didn't match any character from the movies. And for some reason, fans started calling him Jedi Bob. He appeared in exactly 1 set and was never seen again for 22 years. That name wasn't even officially acknowledged until the 2009 LEGO Star Wars Visual Dictionary, 7 years after the set had been released. But then, in 2024, LEGO finally brought him back and gave him his own starfighter, and he became the lead character of the Disney Plus series, LEGO Star Wars Rebuild the Galaxy. Even the voice actor, Bobby Moynihan, turned out to own a Jedi Bob figure before he was cast for the part. This is a big milestone for Jedi Bob, and speaking of milestone minifigures, in 2019, LEGO Star Wars passed 1,000 unique minifigures in total. The 1,000th minifig was Iden Versio, the protagonist of the Star Wars Battlefront 2 video game. She's a character most casual Star Wars fans wouldn't even recognize, and she's only ever been in the Inferno Squad Battle Pack set. The milestone was officially hit in 2019, which means Star Wars went from 0 to 1,000 unique minifigures in exactly 20 years. But the coolest Star Wars minifigure isn't Iden Versio. It's someone way more important. In 2009, LEGO's design team in Billund made a minifigure of George Lucas himself, and it was never sold anywhere publicly, and it wasn't even announced. Because of this, nobody has any idea how many of them were made, or what they're worth. However, one did sell at auction on a website called Prop Store, and it was sold from anywhere from $8,000 to $16,000. But Bricklink has no sales data because so few of them have sold. It's essentially the rarest non-chrome Star Wars minifigure ever made, and almost nobody has one. LEGO used to sell these magnet sets where you could stick minifigures to your fridge or locker, and the cool part was that you could actually remove the minifigure from the magnetic base. So if you wanted to collect rare minifigures, you could just buy the magnet set and pop them off. It was perfect. But then in 2011, LEGO started permanently gluing all of the minifigures to their bases. And I'm not just talking about a little bit of glue. They were gluing the torsos to the legs too, so you literally couldn't take them apart at all. Fans were furious, and I mean, can you blame them? The whole point of buying these was to get the minifigures, and now they were just stuck to a magnet forever. The reason this happened was apparently due to licensing issues with Star Wars, which doesn't make it any less frustrating. But let me show you something super sick that's been gone for way longer. From 1986 to 1998, LEGO had this thing called the 9-volt system, and it was honestly kind of insane. You'd have a battery box and then these special conductive bricks that had metal lining inside of them. And when you connected them all together, they'd make an actual circuit. No wires, no complicated setup, just bricks that conducted electricity. And then you could add light bricks or sound bricks to make sirens, lights, and sounds. The problem was that these systems were bulky and complicated, especially for younger kids, so LEGO discontinued them. But here's the thing, they actually tried a simpler version back in 2019 with some city sets, and people loved it. It just goes to show that sometimes the old features really were better, even if they were more complex. Now, if you've been building LEGO for a while, you probably remember those raised base plates that used to come with certain sets. I'm talking about the ones with built-in terrain, craters, road patterns, all of that. Castle sets had base plates with rocky textures, city sets had roads already printed on them, and space sets had those awesome crater base plates that you could use as ramps. They gave your builds instant scale and made everything feel more complete right out of the box. But LEGO phased them out because of cost, packaging, size, and the fact that they were pretty fragile and could crack if you weren't careful. Now we're stuck with either flat plates or having to build roads ourselves, which takes way more time and pieces. But the worst part, those old crater base plates from Classic Space sell for like $35 to $40 each on the secondhand market. So even if you wanted in on the action, you'd have to pay a lot of money. Speaking of classic themes, let me tell you about something in the castle theme that gave it way more life. LEGO used to include these massive pre-molded pieces that let you build rock formations really easily. People called them burps, which stands for big, ugly rock pieces. And even though the name sounds bad, they were actually super useful and loved. You could snap them together and have a full wall around your castle in minutes, instead of spending an hour building it brick by brick. But LEGO discontinued them because they wanted to shift toward fully brick-built structures for better play value. And I get it, building everything from scratch does give you more flexibility and lets you customize your builds. But at the same time, those burps were iconic, and a lot of people miss being able to throw together a castle that quickly. But castle wasn't the only theme that lost something important. Pirate ships used to come with real fabric sails that had printed designs on them, and they made the ships feel so much more authentic and premium. Like, you'd open the box and see this actual cloth sail, and it just felt special. But these were gradually replaced with plastic sails or brick-built alternatives, and honestly, they're just not the same. The original cloth sails are now expensive collector's items, and some fans have even started making DIY replacements because they miss them so much and can't afford the real ones. I don't know about you, but I'd rather have a real fabric sail than a plastic one any day of the week. Going back to castle for a minute though, there's one more thing I have to mention. These large round shields with a single center stud that you'd see in sets like the 6030 catapult were fan favorites for castle builds. They were simple, they looked great, and you could attach them to minifigures or build them into walls. But they were phased out for more complex printed designs or just regular shields. And sure, the new shields have more detail, but there was something really satisfying about those simple round shields that you just don't get anymore. Oh, and speaking of that catapult set, let me tell you about another thing that's changed. Old LEGO castle sets had functional catapults that could fling projectiles across an entire room. The catapult set from 1984 had this powerful Technic-based mechanism that could launch things with serious force. But modern catapults are way weaker, or they've been replaced by stud shooters, which are fine, I guess, but they're just not as satisfying. There's something about pulling back a catapult arm and watching something fly across the room that stud shooters just can't replicate. But at least catapults are still around in some way. Flick fire missiles, on the other hand, are basically gone. These were introduced in 2006, and they were super simple. You would just flick them with your finger, and they'd shoot out. They weren't as reliable as spring-loaded shooters, but they were way more fun to use. While they're still technically available in some sets, they've mostly been replaced by those spring-loaded shooters and stud shooters, since they're more consistent. Sometimes I feel like LEGO prioritizes function over fun, and this is a perfect example of that. Now, this next feature being removed does kind of make sense, but is still definitely sad. LEGO trains used to connect with magnetic couplers, which was awesome because you could easily attach and detach cars. But small magnets became a safety hazard, especially for younger kids who might swallow them. So in 2005, LEGO introduced this huge sealed buffer beam to keep magnets in trains to make them safer. And now you have to use different connection methods that just aren't as convenient. I totally understand why they did it, but man, those magnetic couplers were so easy to use. But if you think losing train magnets is bad, let me tell you about something that's even worse. From 1987 to 1994, LEGO made 3 legendary monorail sets with futuristic elevated trains and automatic switching tracks. These things were incredible, and people absolutely loved them. But here's the thing. Single pieces of track now sell for $20 or more on the secondhand market, and LEGO has said that the molds are gone and they won't be coming back, despite massive demand. There have been multiple LEGO Ideas projects trying to bring the monorail back, and people have even started 3D printing replacement tracks because the demand is so high. But LEGO just won't do it, and honestly, it's one of the most requested features that LEGO refuses to bring back. But another one is the power function system. This ran from 2007 to 2018, and it was super reliable and standardized. You had motors, lights, and simple plug-and-play connectors that just worked. But it got replaced by Powered Up in 2018, which uses Bluetooth and is supposedly more advanced. The problem is that Powered Up is way more expensive and way more complex to set up. And sure, Bluetooth is cool and all, but sometimes you just want something simple that works without having to connect it to an app or worry about battery life. Power Functions was perfect for that, and a lot of people still prefer it over Powered Up, but at least motors are still around, because pneumatic systems, on the other hand, are basically extinct. LEGO Technic used to have working pneumatic systems with air pumps, cylinders, and hoses that created realistic hydraulic motion. There were 2 generations of this, Generation 1 from 1984 to 1989, and Generation 2 from 1989 and onwards. These systems offered incredible play features and made Technic sets feel like real machinery, but they're rarely included in modern Technic sets anymore because they're too expensive to produce. And I get it, pneumatics are complicated and add a lot to the cost of a set, but man, those old Technic sets with pneumatics were something special. But while we're talking about complex systems that are basically gone, let me show you the 12-volt train system that ended in 1991. This system had remote-controlled signals, points, and lights that you could automate. When LEGO switched to 9-volt trains, most of these electronic accessories were lost. Fans still miss the advanced automation that the 12-volt system offered, because it let you set up really complex train layouts that could run themselves. Now, you either have to use third-party products or just accept that your trains won't be as automated as they used to be. But let's move away from trains and talk about Star Wars for a second. Back in 2005, LEGO released the Ultimate Lightsaber Duel set, and it included battery-powered glowing lightsabers that you could activate by pressing the minifigure's head. How cool is that? You'd press down on the head and the lightsaber would actually light up, but they were discontinued, mostly because they only had a 3-hour battery life. And honestly, that makes a lot of sense. But Star Wars wasn't the only theme with light-up pieces. The Toa Inika sets from Bionicle in 2006 had light-up weapons with LEDs built in. You could press a button and the weapon would glow, and it was incredibly cool. But just like those lightsabers, these were discontinued due to battery shipping and cost issues. Bionicle fans still talk about how awesome these sets were, specifically because of those light-up weapons, and it's a shame that feature never came back. But if you think light-up weapons are cool, let me tell you about Exoforce sets from 2006 to 2008. These sets included light bricks connected to fiber optic cables that make the cockpits of mechs glow. It gave them this realistic, powered-up look that made them feel like they were actually running on energy. Modern mech sets don't have anything like this, and honestly, they feel a lot less impressive because of it. The fiber optics made Exoforce mechs stand out, and it's a feature that I wish LEGO would bring back for modern mech themes. But here's a light and sound brick that's become legendary for a different reason. The 2009 Grand Carousel set included a special sound brick that plays carousel music, and it was only used in that one set. Because of this, the brick sells for insanely high prices on Bricklink, and collectors go crazy trying to find one. It's one of those pieces that became valuable specifically because it's so rare and unique, and you can't get it anywhere else. But now, let me tell you about a theme that completely relied on technology and then lost everything when that technology was shut down. The Hidden Side theme ran from 2019 to 2020, and the sets were designed with rotating elements and colorful pieces that you were supposed to scan with an AR app for ghost hunting gameplay. The sets themselves were cool builds, but the whole gimmick was the app, and in 2023, LEGO discontinued it, which means all that interactive functionality is just gone forever. If you buy a Hidden Side set now, you're only getting half the experience because the AR gameplay is entirely inaccessible. Another theme that had something similar happen is the Nexo Knights theme. From 2016 to 2018, the sets had collectible power shield tiles that worked with an app, but since that app is completely gone now, there's no way to use them again. Around 3 years ago, someone on Reddit noticed that it got taken off the App Store. So I'm not exactly sure when the app got taken down, but I know for sure it's gone forever. Clearly, LEGO has a lot of discontinued tech features, but this next one made people more upset than ever before. LEGO Mindstorms was a programmable robotics platform that taught kids coding and engineering for decades. It was incredible for education, and hobbyists loved it because you could build custom robots and program them to do basically anything. But in 2022, LEGO discontinued Mindstorms in favor of Spike Prime, which is more education-focused and less flexible for custom designs. Spike Prime is fine for classrooms, but hobbyists really miss Mindstorms because it gave you way more freedom to experiment and build whatever you wanted. But here's something that's happening right now that a lot of people are worried about. LEGO is actively trying to phase out paper instructions and move everything over to digital-only manuals. And to make things worse, they've already removed artwork from instruction covers, so now they're just generic white backgrounds instead of having cool themed artwork. Fans want physical manuals because it lets them disconnect from screens while building, and the artwork on the covers used to be part of the excitement of opening a new set. Now everything looks generic and boring, and if LEGO goes fully digital, that physical experience is just gone. But that isn't all, because LEGO's also trying to transition from plastic bags to paper bags. The new paper bags are just plain white with faint brick patterns on them. You can't see through them like you can with the plastic bags, so there's no more excitement of seeing all the colors through the bags when you open the box. But I'm still not done, because there's another thing that made opening sets less exciting, but this one happened a long time ago. LEGO used to include these small catalogs inside sets that showed you other sets in the theme or upcoming releases. You'd finish building your set, and then you could flip through the catalog and see all the other cool stuff you could get. But now it's mostly just QR codes or nothing at all, and honestly, it's not the same. I never even got one of these catalogs in a set. This is something that's been gone for a while, but I really wish they'd bring them back. Did you know that some LEGO sets use compressed air? Back in 1984, LEGO dropped these things called pneumatics, which were basically a system that uses compressed air to move certain parts of a set. The way it works is you have a pump that makes air pressure, and that pressure moves pneumatic cylinders to create realistic movement in whatever set it's attached to. It's the same concept as real hydraulics, except instead of using liquid, LEGO uses air. The first set to use this was the Excavator in 1984, and it was revolutionary for its time because it meant you could actually operate toy construction equipment. But the coolest set ever was probably the Airtech Claw Rig from 1992, because this was the first set to have an automated compressor. Before this, you had to manually pump air into the system, but with the Airtech Claw Rig, everything was done for you. The crazy part is that LEGO still uses pneumatics today. They just upgraded the system to Pneumatics 2.0 in 2018 with the Forest Machine set. The new system system is way more efficient and has better seals, which means it can handle more pressure and make smoother movements. But pneumatics wasn't the only functional feature LEGO was experimenting with in the 80s and 90s. There's a sub-theme in space called M-Tron, and it's one of the only LEGO themes ever made that has actual magnets incorporated into the sets. You could use them to pick up other builds in the set, like cargo containers, which would honestly be cool now, let alone in the 90s. But now, let's jump to 2020, because the AT-AT set has some really clever features that most people probably missed. First off, there's a spot in the back of the set where you can actually store a speeder bike. It's one of those details that LEGO didn't have to include, but they did anyway because it makes the set more accurate to how the AT-AT actually works in Star Wars. But the coolest part is that LEGO also built in a place for Luke to hang off the bottom, just like he did in Episode 5 when he used his grappling hook and lightsaber to take it down. There's a piece hanging off of some string, so if you put Luke on there, it looks exactly like the iconic scene from The Empire Strikes Back. But if you want to talk about hidden mechanisms, the Indiana Jones Temple of the Golden Idol set from 2023 is absolutely packed with them. This set has 4 different play features that are all activated by different things, and they're hidden, so you can't see how they work. The first feature is a giant rolling boulder, just like the one from the opening scene. The boulder doesn't just roll straight down, it actually follows a curved path, and surprisingly, it doesn't go off track. The second feature is a wall section that raises and lowers, which recreates the trap doors and moving walls that Indy has to deal with throughout the temple. The third feature is a swinging minifigure that goes across a pit, which is a reference to all those scenes where Indy has to swing across gaps using his whip. And the fourth feature is that the temple can actually destroy itself. The designers wanted this set to feel just like the movie, and with all of these play features, it definitely does. Accurate sets are some of the highest selling LEGO sets ever. So when I saw that LEGO was making a Porsche 911 GT3R race car this year, I instantly knew it was gonna go crazy. This thing is based on a real race car made by Porsche that won the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship last year, and the Rexy style was a fan favorite. Obviously, LEGO nailed the looks, but they also added some crazy features, one of which you can only find on race cars. First of all, there's a knob on the back of the car that turns the front wheels. So instead of having to stick your hand in the car and turn the steering wheel, you can turn the knob and play with the car a lot more easily. Second, each wheel has its own individual suspension, which I don't even know if LEGO's ever done this for a Technicar of this size. So this was really cool to see. But best of all, there's a play feature that mimics air jacks. The mechanism for it seems pretty complex. I mean, just look at the bottom of the car. But speaking of complex mechanisms, the Ninjago City set from 2017 has a working ATM. There's a lever hidden around the back of the set, and when you push it, it dispenses LEGO $100 bills one at a time. The mechanism automatically loads the next bill after you take one, which means you can keep using it over and over until you dispense 11. That's the limit. But that's not all. Ninjago City even has a toilet that actually flushes. The bathroom has a toilet that can flush around 1x1 tile to the base of the set, which simulates, well, you know. It's tucked away and difficult to access, but it's definitely there if you know where to look. I have no idea why LEGO decided to make a flushing toilet, but I'm glad they did. This is one of the funniest play features they've ever made. Anyways, the Assembly Square set from 2017 is packed with hidden features, so let me break down a few of them. First off, the upper apartment has a sofa bed that works just like a real one. It's a fully functional piece of furniture in LEGO form. You can fold it out, fold it in, and it stays sturdy in both positions without falling apart. The set also has a working oven in the bakery with a door that opens so you can take out baked goods. But the coolest part is that there's a rod you can push on the outside of the set to actually move the baked goods into the oven. It's basically the only play feature in the set, but it's a really good one. Another modular building set with a cool furniture function is the Parisian restaurant set. This one is also a bed, but instead of a pull-out couch, it's a Murphy bed that folds in and out of the wall. These things are really popular in small apartments because of how much space they save, but I never thought I'd see one in LEGO. But this next feature is legitimately insane because LEGO hid something in the Lion Knights castle set from 2022 that connects it to castle sets from the 1980s. It has Technic holes on the sides, and these aren't just random holes that happen to be there. They're specifically designed so you can connect the castle to modular castle sets from the 1980s. LEGO didn't advertise this at all, and they didn't put it in the instructions either. All they did was put it in an article where they interviewed the designers. It's such a simple thing to do, but now a set from 2022 is compatible with sets from the 80s. Isn't that sick? Anyways, the Disney Castle set also has a hidden feature that most people probably didn't notice. The Grand Ballroom from Cinderella has a rotating dance floor mechanism that actually spins when you turn it. It's a reference to the iconic ballroom scene from the movie where Cinderella and Prince Charming dance together. And the fact that LEGO made it functional instead of static is a really nice touch. You can put minifigures on the dance floor and spin them around, which makes the set feel a lot more magical. But the Batman theme is full of hidden features. So let's start with the classic TV series set from 2016. First off, there's a button hidden under Shakespeare's head that, in the show, would move the bookcase and reveal the bat poles. Now, obviously, LEGO can't put a real button inside their Shakespeare piece, but it's good that they worked it in somehow. If you could press it though, the bookshelf would open. So of course, LEGO recreated this with a sick play feature. The poles at the top are meant for display, so they don't actually go all the way down. But if you go to the other side of the set, that's where you'll find functional poles. These are the ones that the minifigures can slide down with ease, so it's a perfect recreation from the classic show. But the newer Batcave set from 2017 has a transformation chamber, and it's one of the sickest play features in all of LEGO Batman. You put Bruce Wayne on one side of a rotating mechanism, turn it, and Batman appears on the other side. It's a lot like the Vecna transformation in the Creel House set. I loved that feature, and I didn't even know the Batman one existed until now. But if you want to talk about satisfying mechanisms, the Creator roller coaster set from 2018 is fully functional, and it's so satisfying. First, there's a chain that pulls the cars up to the first drop. Then, once the cars reach the top, gravity takes over, and they go through all the twists and turns on their own. The chain lift works exactly like a real roller coaster. It's motorized, and it catches onto the bottom of the cars and pulls them up the incline. You can either hand crank it or add a motor to make it automatic, but either way, it's genuinely one of the coolest functional sets LEGO has ever made. But did you know that that bat pole feature from before isn't the only one in LEGO? The Ghostbusters Firehouse set from 2016 also has a really cool pole that minifigures can slide down. As they slide, they spin because of the spiral shape, just like in the movie when the Ghostbusters get an emergency call and they have to go rush down to the garage. It's such a simple feature, but just like the one in the Batman set, it makes the set so much better. However, the Space Shuttle Discovery set from 2021 has not one, but two incredible functional features that show just how much research LEGO put into making the set accurate. First, the cargo bay has a flexible, articulated robotic arm called the Canadarm, and it can extend, rotate, and even grab the Hubble Space Telescope. This is a real piece of equipment that was used on actual space shuttle missions, and NASA used it to deploy satellites and repair the Hubble Space Telescope in orbit. But the second feature might be even cooler. There's a little panel at the back of the ship that deploys the landing gear. All four wheels pop out at once, just like they would if the real ship was landing. LEGO always goes really hard on their sets for NASA, and they did the same thing for the Saturn V rocket from 2020. The real Discovery shuttle had 3 stages because it was built to go really far, so LEGO had to incorporate this somehow, and they did a really good job. Even when the set is fully built, it's super easy to break it into all 3 stages. They even all have their own thrusters on the back, so the designers really put a lot of time into making this set accurate. But the craziest transformation feature LEGO has ever done is probably in the Pirates of Barracuda Bay set from 2020. This set is a 2,545 piece shipwreck island, and it looks amazing as a display piece with palm trees, a wrecked ship, and treasure scattered all around. But here's the crazy part. The entire island can be completely disassembled and rebuilt into a fully built pirate ship. The 3 wrecked ship sections detach from the island and connect together with sails. And the final ship is inspired by the 1989 Black Seas Barracuda, which is one of the most iconic pirate sets LEGO has ever made. So you're essentially getting 2 completely different builds in one set, which is genuinely incredible value. Even cooler than this though is that the set actually came from LEGO Ideas, ideas, which means it's fan-made. And this next one is also fan-made, but it might be the most mechanically impressive set ever. The typewriter set from 2021 has working keys and a moving carriage, just like a real typewriter from the 1950s. When you press any of the keys, a type bar jumps up, while the carriage moves from right to left. The set has a spring-loaded escapement mechanism that moves the carriage one notch with each keystroke, and you can even feed real paper into the platen roller. Now, obviously, it won't type anything, since these are just Lego pieces, but still, it's sick regardless. Now, this next one is a bit simpler, but the Ship in a Bottle set from 2018 has a really cool feature built into the stand. Most people just look at the bottle, but if you take it off, you'll find a compass underneath it. Unfortunately, it doesn't actually work like a real compass, with magnetism and all that, but there is a needle in the middle that you can spin around, which looks pretty fun to do. The compass is just one of many details on the stand, but it's one of those little features that shows how much thought Lego puts into even the smallest parts of their sets. Shout out Tiago for this one. But finally, the bucket wheel excavator from 2016 might have the most complex motorized system Lego has ever built. The set has a power functions motor that simultaneously operates multiple different things, and I mean multiple. It rotates the massive bucket wheel, moves dual conveyor belts that transport stuff from the wheel all the way through the excavator, rotates the entire thing 360 degrees, and makes it move forwards and backwards. All of these functions are happening at the same time with one motor, which shows just how much engineering went into making this set work. If you thought that pneumatic stuff at the start of the video was cool, this thing completely blew it out of the water. I mean, it's not even close. Lego bricks are made from ABS plastic, which means they have a melting point of about 220 degrees Fahrenheit. So you could literally boil a pot of water, put bricks in it, and watch them melt, which you definitely shouldn't do. I also found this video of someone using a lighter on a minifigure, and if boiling water can melt it, a lighter definitely can. But there are other ways to destroy them that are way more common. Certain colors of Lego bricks are actually brittle and break easily. Reddish brown, dark brown, and dark red pieces from the 2010s have a major problem where they just snap in half for no reason. This became such a huge issue that the Lego group had to announce a quality fix for reddish brown pieces specifically. The problem was so widespread that people started avoiding sets with lots of brown pieces because they knew they would eventually break. Bionicle joints are also notorious for breaking. If you collected Bionicle back in the day, you probably have a box full of broken ball joints somewhere. And trans clear pieces crack all the time too, especially if you try to force them together too hard. So if anyone tells you that Lego bricks are indestructible, they're completely wrong. Myth busted. But even if your bricks don't break, they still won't last forever, which leads us to myth number 2, yellowing bricks. UV exposure from sunlight yellows and brittles ABS plastic over time, especially white and light gray bricks. If you leave a white Lego set on a windowsill for a few years, it'll turn yellow and become weaker. The plastic literally degrades from the UV radiation, and once it's yellowed, there's no way to fully reverse it unless you use bleach. There have been entire experiments where people sacrificed Lego bricks to science just to study how UV damage actually works. Some people have tried using hydrogen peroxide treatments to restore yellowed bricks, which does actually work if you soak them for long enough. But the internal damage is still there, even if the yellow color isn't. So the myth that Lego bricks last forever without degrading is completely false. Myth busted. On the topic of colors, a lot of people think Legos use the same color for their gray pieces since the very first ones, but that's also false. In 2004, Lego made a controversial decision to change from light gray and dark gray to light bluish gray and dark bluish gray. Adult fans of Lego absolutely hated this change, and they started calling the new gray Blay because it had a very noticeable blue tint to it. The reason Lego made this change was because the old gray was harder to photograph and looked inconsistent in marketing materials, but AFOLs were so upset about it that there are still debates in the community about whether the change was worth it or not. So are the grays still the same? Definitely not. Myth busted. But gray isn't the only color that's changed. Brown also changed in 2004, from old brown to reddish brown. This was part of a larger color palette update that Lego did to make their pieces more consistent across different production facilities. But the problem was that the formula for reddish brown wasn't as strong as the old brown formula. The new color was more brittle, which is why so many reddish brown pieces from the 2000s break so easily. Lego eventually acknowledged this problem and worked on improving the formula, but by then, millions of brittle brown pieces had already been sold. So not only did we bust another myth, but we got concrete proof for a different myth from earlier. Look at what my boy Sater said. Apparently the subscribe button changes color when you click it, so go try it out. Anyways, another huge myth is that LEGO sets are more expensive now than they've ever been before. People complain about this constantly on forums and social media, saying LEGO used to be affordable, and now it's ridiculously overpriced. But here's the truth. When you adjust for inflation, the price per piece has stayed between 10 and 12 cents for decades. Multiple studies have analyzed LEGO pricing data going back to the 1970s, and the price per piece has been remarkably stable. The reason sets seem more expensive now is because they have way more pieces than they used to. A LEGO set from the 1980s might have 200 pieces and cost $20, while a set from today might have 2,000 pieces and cost $200. The price per piece is the same, but the sets are just bigger and more detailed. Modern sets also have way more unique pieces, printed elements, and complex building techniques that make them feel more premium. So LEGO hasn't actually gotten more expensive. The sets have just gotten more complex and ambitious. Myth busted. Myth number 6 is pretty crazy though. LEGO didn't actually invent the interlocking brick. A British inventor named Hilary Fisher Page created them in 1939 for a company called Kittycraft. His self-locking building bricks had the same stud and tube system that LEGO uses today. LEGO saw these bricks, liked the design, and started making their own version. But here's the twist. LEGO didn't officially buy the rights to the design until 1981, which was over 40 years after Kittycraft patented it. By that point, LEGO had already crushed the competition, so they basically took someone else's patented design, improved it with better quality control and marketing, and made it way more popular. But the original idea wasn't theirs. Myth busted. A lot of people also think LEGO has always made plastic toys, but that's false too. LEGO started as a wooden toy company in 1932. Ole Kirk Christiansen was a carpenter in Denmark, and he made wooden ducks, cars, yo-yos, and other toys. The name LEGO was chosen in 1934, but the company was still making wooden toys at that point, and they didn't start making plastic toys until 1947 when they bought a plastic injection molding machine. Even then, they were making both wooden and plastic toys for years, but in 1960, their wood factory burned down in a massive fire, and after that, they decided to focus entirely on plastic bricks. So for almost 30 years, LEGO was primarily a wooden toy company, and plastic was just a side experiment. Myth busted. But even when they started making plastic bricks, they didn't use the same material as they do today. LEGO started with cellulose acetate in 1949 when they first introduced the automatic binding bricks. But cellulose acetate had serious problems. It warped over time, it discolored easily, and it didn't hold its shape well at all. So in 1963, LEGO moved on to ABS plastic, which is acrylonitrile butadiene styrene. Let's just call it ABS. ABS is much more stable, more durable, and holds color way better, but that doesn't mean they aren't looking for the next successor. Now they're testing sustainable materials like plant-based plastics and recycled ocean plastic to try and move away from petroleum-based ABS. So the myth that LEGO has always used the same plastic since 1949 is false. Myth busted. Myth number 9 is that LEGO only manufactures in Denmark. People assume everything is made in Billund because that's where the company was founded, but LEGO actually has factories all over the world. They manufacture in Hungary, the Czech Republic, Mexico, China, Vietnam, and they're opening a new factory in Virginia in 2027. LEGO went worldwide a while ago, so obviously this myth is busted. But finally, we have a myth that is true. LEGO bricks from 1958 still work with modern-day bricks. In 1958, LEGO patented the stud and tube coupling system, which is the design that makes LEGO bricks lock together so securely. That same system is still used today, which means you have perfect compatibility across 67 years of LEGO production. You can take a brick from 1958 and connect it to a brick from 2025, and it'll work perfectly. Now, don't get me wrong, LEGO's made slight changes along the way, so the bricks won't feel as sturdy as connecting to modern-day bricks. But it'll still work, which is really cool. Myth confirmed. Speaking of compatibility, myth number 11 is that Duplo bricks and system bricks are compatible too, and this one is also true. Duplo was introduced in 1969 specifically for younger children, and it was designed to be exactly 2 times the dimensions of regular system bricks in every direction. LEGO wanted families to be able to transition from Duplo to system as kids got older, and they wanted siblings of different ages to be able to play together. So Duplo studs fit perfectly onto system bricks, and system studs fit perfectly into Duplo bricks. LEGO even released official instructions showing how to combine Duplo and system in the same build, so if LEGO themselves are saying it, you know it's true. Myth confirmed. Alright, this next myth is that a single Lego brick can support an infinite amount of weight. People love repeating this because Lego bricks are incredibly strong for their size. But the BBC actually tested this in a controlled experiment, and a standard 2x2 brick fails at 432 kilograms, which is about 950 pounds. That's the equivalent of stacking 375,000 bricks on top of each other, or building a tower 2.17 miles tall before the bottom brick collapses. So Lego bricks are incredibly strong, but they're not indestructible. And to make sure, I ran over a 2x4 with my car, which weighs about 3,000 pounds. And, yeah, it definitely did not survive. Myth busted. Myth number 13 is that the UCS Millennium Falcon is the most expensive Lego set ever released. And for a long time, this was absolutely true. The Millennium Falcon retailed for $850 when it came out in 2017, and it was the most expensive set Lego had ever released. It held that title for years, and people assumed it would always be the most expensive set. But in 2025, the UCS Death Star was released for $1,000, making it the most expensive Lego set ever. So even though it happened pretty recently, this myth is technically busted. Along that same line, people think the biggest Lego set has the most pieces, but biggest is subjective. The UCS Death Star has 9,023 pieces and is over 2 feet tall and almost 3 feet wide, but the Titanic has 9,090 pieces, which is technically more. A set that's bigger than both of those, though, is the Eiffel Tower, which stands at almost 5 feet tall and uses over 10,000 pieces. The debate over what Lego set is the biggest is super subjective. Is it piece count, height, surface area, all three of them combined? Nobody can come to an agreement. So I guess this one is still a myth. Anyways, myth number 14 is only partially wrong. Most people know that Lego comes from the Danish phrase leg godt, which means play well. Ole Kirk Christiansen combined the first 2 letters of each word to create the name in 1934. But what a lot of people don't know is that Lego also means I assemble in Latin. This was a complete coincidence that the company found out years after they chose the name, but it's such a perfect fit that it almost feels intentional. So the myth that Lego means more than just play well is technically confirmed, but because Ole Kirk didn't do it on purpose, I can't give it to him. Myth busted. But myth number 15 is something that sounds completely fake, but is 100% real. Lego is the world's largest tire manufacturer. They produce between 306 to 400 million tires annually, which is more than every real tire company, like Bridgestone, Michelin, or Goodyear. Obviously, these are tiny tires for Lego vehicles and not real cars, but Guinness World Records officially recognizes Lego as the largest tire manufacturer in the world. So this is one of those facts that sounds completely fake, but is 100% real. Myth confirmed. Another myth is that Lego minifigures have always had yellow skin. For a long time, this was Lego's standard. Yellow was supposed to be a neutral skin tone that represented everyone equally, regardless of race. But in 2003 with the NBA sets and 2004 with licensed themes like Star Wars and Harry Potter, Lego started using skin tones for minifigures based on real people. And it turns out Lego Duplo had been using flesh-colored figures since 1983, way before system minifigures made the switch. But the myth that minifigures always had yellow skin is technically true, since Duplo figures aren't minifigures. Myth confirmed. Myth number 17 is that Lego sets are only made for children. This might have been true decades ago when Lego was mainly a kids' toy company, but it's completely wrong now. Lego has an entire 18+ line specifically marketed toward adults, with complex builds, high piece counts, and premium price points. The AFOL market, which stands for Adult Fans of Lego, makes up about 25% of Lego's total revenue, which is a massive chunk of their business. Sets like the Colosseum, the Titanic, and the UCS Death Star are clearly not designed for kids. They're designed for adults who want complex, challenging builds that take days to complete. So Lego is very much an adult hobby now, not just a kid's toy. Myth busted. People also think Lego bricks work perfectly with every other brand of plastic bricks, but this is completely false. Lego's manufacturing process is unbelievably try-hard. They make their bricks accurate down to 0.002 millimeters, which is insanely precise for mass-produced plastic toys. Other brands like Mega Bloks or generic off-brand bricks don't have this same level of precision, so they never fit quite right. If the fit is too loose, your structure becomes unstable unstable and falls apart really easily. If it's too tight, you can't separate the bricks without damaging them or hurting your fingers. So Lego bricks technically can connect to other brands because they use the same basic stud design, but they don't work nearly as well. Myth busted. Another myth is that Lego never recalls sets or discontinues pieces, but they've had 3 serious recalls in their career. The first one was the Lego Primo Ladybird Rattle in 1998, but apparently Lego got reports from parents that the holes in it became a vacuum and got stuck in kids' mouths. This is an obvious choking hazard, so it definitely had to go. The second one was the Lego Explore Super Truck from 2002. This one was aimed for kids that were a little older, but the problem with it was that the wheels were removable, and when you removed the wheels, the axles were super pointy, which is clearly not something you want your 3-year-old playing with. But the last recall was the Power Functions remote controller from 2009. This was made to control RC cars in the Power Functions theme, but Lego got 4 reports saying that it heated up after batteries were put in. Luckily, no one was hurt, but I guess it got hot enough that people were genuinely worried about it, so Lego had to get that one gone too. But what Lego myth surprised you the most? Be sure to let me know down in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe.